Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Welcome to Yoga Off Your Mat. And welcome to Walk on Wednesday. Walk on Wednesday is a day where we invite someone we think is sort of cool, got a cool little story, doing something cool, or someone we run into that we think is really cool. And today's cool entrance is Bhakti Grant from Detroit area. And Bhakti Grant came on pilgrimage with me just recently to Nepal. And he was just such a bright light on the pilgrimage. He's very lucid in the way he speaks. He was very inspirational. One of the first things my son said after like the first day was like, I like Bhakti Grant. And, if you were on pilgrimage, we all love Bhakti Grant. And then Bhakti Grant, a few days in, he told me, Wisdom of the Sages saved my life. Bhakti Grant, welcome to the show. How are you, my
Prabhu?
friend?
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm wonderful. How are you both? Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks. And you're from the Detroit area, right? You go to the temple there in Detroit?
Correct. Yeah, I live just outside of Detroit in Warren, Michigan. And I regularly attend the Detroit ISKCON Temple.
Cool. And how long you been into Bhakti for-ish?
2 years with I dipped my toes in the water and then kind of went back out wading around in the ocean of Maya, and then kind of came running back pretty quickly, and so that's where I'm at. So now maybe about 8 months of solid practice.
Nice. I love that when people are like, yeah, Krishna consciousness is pretty cool. And they're like, wait a second, this is too much. This is too crazy. What am I thinking about?
Then you flip
and then
back
they're like,
again.
no.
I'm coming back.
I'm back. I made a terrible mistake.
Sorry.
Can you explain what it means to you got your life saved? What does that mean?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I'll just start off by saying I'm a grateful, recovered alcoholic and addict and an aspiring devotee. And I just want to offer my respectful obeisances to both you and Kaustubha. And the guru out there, I'm just going to say, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinda. Only through the mercy of my teachers am I going to say anything good here today, So basically, I was a mess. I was an active addict, an alcoholic, and I have been dealing with these issues since I was about 13. Ended up in rehabs when I was 15, and I would get periods of sobriety, which was always due to active participation in Alcoholics Anonymous. But again, the temptation of Maya would always lure me back in. So I'd get 5 years sober, and then I would go back out drinking for 5 years, and then life would beat me down, and I would come back to AA, and then I would feel that there wasn't all the answers in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't feel like I knew how to, work on my conscious contact with God and the meditation. And so I would go back out drinking again. And, in my adult life, I was able to become somewhat materially successful, and start a family, get a nice home, a daughter, wife. And so drugs and alcohol were playing kind of an exciting role at that time for me. And hallucinogens actually became like my go-to spiritual experience of choice. And so it started off recreationally, and then became like habitual, like every single day, all day, a variety of different chemicals. And it just became like an all-consuming obsession. And it, as I became more interested in these chemicals, my wife's interest in me diminished quickly, and it started leading to more fights. And in a very traumatic way, we ended up splitting up. And this is when I first found Bhakti, was just the despair of losing my wife. I was very sad, and I tried going back to the Catholic Church, but instead I reached out and I found the Hare Krishna temple. And so that was when I was first welcomed down there and started doing a Gita study group. But after about 3 months of just, going to temple regularly, doing a little chanting here and there, putting some Krishna pictures around my house, again, the allure of the drugs pulled me back in. And
Wow.
and so it was, I was, like I said, all day, every day, regardless of whether or not my daughter was around, regardless of not whether my family was around. It was just basically, you needed to accept this as who I was. And if you didn't, then we didn't have a relationship. And so basically what happened was this all culminated in higher and higher doses, which led to a near-death experience where I straight up went out into the backyard and took what I thought was a normal amount of chemicals for that day, and then was so overwhelmed with whatever I took that I laid down in the dirt and just became covered in black flies. Like, flies were all over my entire body. It was the last thing I remember. And then I left my body and had what I call like a white light experience, where I went into the white light. I'm like convinced it was like the Brahmana effulgence, because I was completely vaporized, and I have no concept of how long I was gone. But when I came out of that state and my brain rebooted and I sat back up in the dirt, I was in a state of utter fear, and I had never had that happen to me before. And I had like this booming voice from the sky tell me, get your house in order. And it was like the voice of God, and I had never heard anything like this. And so I got up, and I was just so manic that I just started burning all the drugs in the house, started just throwing all the paraphernalia.
This is like a movie.
Oh man, it was the craziest, most dramatic movie you could ever imagine. It was like a $5,000 sacrificial bonfire, just throwing all these chemicals in there, having like chemicals splash
Hope
back.
the neighborhood was okay.
Oh, it was definitely not the right choice at the time.
Okay.
But yeah, so I couldn't process what had happened to me. I couldn't like think about anything other than chanting for some reason after that. And so I had to have my mother come down and stay with me, and she was going to stay for a week, and she ended up staying for a month and helping me clean the house, helping me just process and slowly like help my brain come back down to earth speed.
Wow.
And so during that time, I went right back to Bhakti. I started going back to the temple regularly. I started doing my Gita group on Fridays, and started reading. I'd already been listening to Wisdom of the Sages casually, but that was when I started like binge listening, like sacrificing the hearing, where all I wanted to do was listen to Krishna consciousness. And so I would be listening to 3 to 5 Wisdom of the Sages a day at sometimes. And during this period, the first 3 months, I was riding like this like spiritual high, where I literally felt like God like thumbprinted me and like gave me a new mission. And so things were really kind of easy at first, but after maybe the first 3 months, I started having creeping thoughts coming back in about using. And so it concerned me. And so I had heard you guys talking about the Bhakti Recovery Group multiple times on Wisdom of the Sages, and I thought it sounded interesting. So I made the $1 donation to the Patreon account, and did one meeting of the Bhakti Recovery Group. And it was awesome. It was an AA format that I was familiar with. They talked about Bhagavad Gita. And so I was hooked. I really, really liked it. And I was invited to join the WhatsApp group. And I'm usually not like a social media guy, like not a Facebook guy, not an Instagrammer. Try to stay off the internet, stay off my phone as much as possible. And I also tend to isolate. So joining the WhatsApp group was kind of just an afterthought. But I went ahead and did it. And I'm very grateful I did, because flash forward maybe another few weeks to a month, and despite doing 16 rounds, and despite keeping up with my regulative principles, by about the fourth month in sobriety, my depression was just so utterly low. And it was around Christmas time, and I have PTSD issues with my wife around Christmas time that come up every year. And so yeah, I just got so low that I considered committing suicide. And that morning, Christmas morning, I chanted my 16 rounds, just weeping to Krishna, just wringing myself out, begging to have my wife back, begging to have my life back. I mean, I couldn't take drugs. I knew that that wouldn't fix my problem. I knew my brain chemistry was just so off from all the binging that I didn't know if it would ever recover. And for whatever reason, my brain was just telling me, kill yourself, die. Everybody would be better without you. And I didn't want to reach out to anybody, because again, that's my depression, that's my disease. But it was just telling me, don't ruin anybody's Christmas. Don't, you're so selfish. You're going to ruin everything for everybody. And so I ended up calling a suicide hotline, and believe it or not, they just put me on hold, and they just said, someone will be right with you.
What?
Someone will be right with you.
I think Christmas time is maybe a very busy time for them,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I sat on hold for like 5 minutes before I eventually hung up. And before, thank God, before I hurt myself, I remembered the WhatsApp group. And it was about, like I said, 5:30 in the morning on Christmas morning. And I just sent out a message saying, I can't stop thinking about killing myself. And within moments, I had just dozens of numbers flood, people saying, don't do it, call me now, call me right now. And men and women's numbers just flooded onto my screen. And not knowing a single person, I just started calling, and I called the first 3 people. And after talking to different people and getting a couple different perspectives, I talked for about maybe an hour and a half, and they were able to talk me down. And I was able to go on and have Christmas with my family. But that was when I realized that, at least for me, I need more than just bhakti. I needed to also have the steps and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that's when I became an active member of the Bhakti Recovery Group. And I got a sponsor through the Bhakti Recovery Group. He's an amazing guy. He actually drove all the way from New York to Detroit just to work steps with me.
Wow.
Which is like, I know.
Incredible.
I mean, what are we even talking about? So I'm just so blessed. And I've been sober ever since. And, and like, good association is definitely like the keystone of bhakti. And it is the same of recovery, and the way that an alcoholic can help another alcoholic, no non-alcoholic ever can. And so it's just cool because the Bhakti Recovery Group just takes the message of AA or NA and doesn't adulterate. It just adds Krishna consciousness to it. And it uses the Gita and Prabhupada's other wisdom literature, and it just really fills in the gaps and helps us stay sober, but also helps us to develop a personal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. And when I was in AA before, that was one of the things. I had no problem believing in God. Some people really have have difficulty with that in Alcoholics Anonymous. But for me, I wanted to go one step further. I wanted to like really develop that relationship with God. And so, you know, that's what Bhakti is all about, is teaching us to really come to love Godhead. And so it's become like another opportunity, you know, outside of temple and outside of my Gita class or Bhakti Shastri, outside of chanting. Now I get another chance a couple times a week to sit down with like-minded people and hear and remember the glories of Krishna and practically apply the sacred teachings.
Dr.
And
Grant, that is an incredible story. I mean, I'm like moved to tears just hearing of it. The idea of, you know, a person going through some type of suffering, they reach out to a therapist. You go to the therapist for 50 minutes, once a week, twice a week. But what the 12-step program and the Bhakti Recovery program, it's like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like when you're like in an active addiction, you don't need a therapist once a week. You need a therapist that you can call 24/7, or a friend or someone that you're not going to isolate. 'Cause isolation is one of the symptoms of addictive behavior. You don't want to reach out, and you've got all these numbers now. It's like such a beautiful gift. And I want to really thank all our Bhakti Recovery people putting all this together, not doing it for ego or money. They're just doing it. And it's figuratively and literally saving lives. And, you know, you explained you explained it so beautifully. Everybody was just like nodding and weeping. And I appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing this. And it gives us a chance to really glorify all the people in their active service of reaching out. And I really want to thank that gentleman who drove to Detroit. I mean, can anybody say their regular therapist has driven, 3,000, 1,500 miles to go and work the steps with you? That is like unbelievable. I thank you for, Grant told me, he maybe told me 2 sentences on the pilgrimage, but that is beautiful. I'm so glad you shared all the details with us. Thank you very much for joining.
Oh yeah, definitely, Prabhu. And I just wanted to say that if anybody's in Detroit or visiting Detroit, feel free to reach out to Raghunath and get my contact info. I'd love to set up a tour of our amazing temple. We got like a first-rate art collection. We got a fate exhibit, and it was one of the few temples that Prabhupada actually lived in. So his energy just reverberates from that temple. And if there's anybody out there that is depressed or struggling with addiction, again, reach out and get my contact info. I'd be happy to sponsor anybody or help lead you to the Bhakti Recovery Group. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Grant. Thanks for joining. It's one of those things, Kaustubha. It's like if you're depressed, you struggle. The tendency is to think, yeah, I'm depressed. Everybody else is having a great time in their life. Everybody else has their act together. Everybody else is smooth sailing, wrinkle free. Only I'm depressed. I've seen the internet. People are doing great things with their life. People are having wonderful situations. They're at the beach or they're with family and friends. And this is not me though. And so just the fact that, just to get into a community of a group, where people say, I'm struggling. That is like a liberating thing, because the other way of thinking, it's just me, is even more isolating. And so, yeah, it's such a necessity to have this community. Thanks all the Bhakti Recovery people. And I really think the Bhakti community in America, since it's started, it needed something like this. And I'm really, really happy. It's really manifesting and becoming a lifeline, Thanks everybody for being part of this. Because if someone's a Patreon member or not, if someone's not a Patreon member, you get it. You give $1 a month, and you can get in the Bhakti Recovery Group. What do they do from there, Mara? Do you know? Because I don't know. How do you get in the Bhakti Recovery?
You just write to Bhakti Recovery at gmail.com. Bhakti Recovery Group at gmail.com.
Bhakti Recovery Group.
That's right, Nancy. Bhakti Recovery Group. Yeah. Yes.
At gmail.com. Okay. And then you're in. You don't even need secret codes. You just need that email address, and then you can be welcome in. Okay, let's start the magic. What do you say? Well, actually, that
Alright.
was pretty magical. I feel
Let's
inspired.
continue the magic.
Let's have more magic. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati uttama bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart will become eradicated, and loving service to the transcendent Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, will be established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Tamurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Midatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master is forcing my eyes open with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my obeisances. Hey, Kaustubha, we have to say a prayer going out to Pankaj Jungri Prabhu, who left this world, and as well as I'm just heard a lot of devotees in Pune that there's a huge communities of people in India suffering, and just want our heart goes out to them, our prayers go out to them, and may Krishna be in their thoughts in no matter what condition they're in. It's really sobering. It's been a very sobering time, Kaustubha.
Yeah, I remember when COVID first started and we spoke, on the show about how, well, now people that we know will be passing away, and we had to be prepared for that,
Yeah.
And here we are over a year later, and it's just swinging across India now, so heavy. Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
All right, so we are in a great place, a wonderful place, a very sweet place. Canto 3, Chapter 9, text. Is it 15?
Well, let's start with 13. That's
13, okay.
Where we left off yesterday.
But the pious activities of the people.
Why don't we just at least make sure people know who's speaking?
Okay.
So this is Brahma speaking to Lord Vishnu. He's just building up to, he's got some requests regarding creative energy, right? He's got a job to do, and he's standing in front of Lord Vishnu, which is the creation, universal creation. It's a big job. And
it's a big job, I know. You think you got a big job? You think I got a day ahead of me today. Oh yeah? You got to create the universe? All right, then shut up.
Okay. So he's got to prepare himself for that. So he's going to have, and he sees it as a service. It's what he feels it's his duty to carry out. In service of Vishnu, as well as in service of every living being. But he knows it's not easy. And he knows he needs the blessings for this, right? He's taking his duties really serious in life, and he's connecting with Lord Vishnu. He's going to have some requests for some inspiration and some empowerment. But before he gets there, he doesn't just jump there. He's building up to it, and so within that, he's offering some forms of glorification and appreciation. So why don't we go ahead now? We can start with text 13.
Okay. But the pious activities of the people, such as performance of Vedic rituals, charity, austerity, penances, and transcendental service, performed with a view to worship you and satisfy you by offering you the fruit of results, are also beneficial. Such acts of religion, right, religious ritual, dharma, never go in vain.
Yeah. So because earlier, a couple texts back, he said there are people that take the process of hearing Bhagavatam really seriously. Their hearts become cleansed, and Krishna sits in their heart, and he appears to them in whatever form they worship him. So that's full-on connection. And then in text 12, he spoke about how more materialistic people worship, sometimes with pompous kind of rituals and demonstrations, and it said that Vishnu's not so pleased with that. And he said that for the non-devotee, he's entirely unavailable. Now, this verse talks about a kind of middle ground, right? Where it's okay, you know what? I'm not fully, when we talk about hearing Bhagavatam, that's pure bhakti, right? That's just like it's an activity that is purely 100% focused on developing my love for God in a very direct way. But this verse is saying, but even if you're not that that attraction's not there, right? Which will cover like a lot of people. Like a lot of people may, hearing and chanting these mantras, it's not, they don't find it particularly engaging, but they want to be connected. So it's saying, well, then whatever you do in life, whatever rituals you do, whatever, if you give charity, if you do some kind of austerities in life, whatever you're doing in life, do it for the pleasure of God, right? So it's an activity that might not be pure bhakti, but then make an offering of it, And if you do that, that's also super beneficial. All right.
Yeah. That was the story that led us to telling the story of the wives of the Brahmanas.
Wives of Brahmanas.
And we really teased that story out yesterday in Sweet Baby Krishna.
When you say teased it out, I worry a little bit, Raghu, because I don't know that
sir,
kind of details may be created out of you get creative.
See where he goes right with
prayers
this
for creative energy before telling the story.
Here's how we teased it out. We went into the Bhagavatam, and then we read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentaries.
Okay, all right.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm just getting paranoid. I'm getting paranoid over here. Okay.
He thinks I'm just making stuff up.
Mara, were you there?
I was there. He did stick to the text.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't worry.
See, by the way, this little joking banter is actually very important because Kaustubha, he's a devotee. And so part of being a devotee is that we don't speculate. We don't create our own story. We stick to the text. And that is how things get preserved. And so if I start saying, if I tell Kaustubha, hey, I heard this story about Lord Vishnu, the first thing Kaustubha is not going to say, oh, you did? Tell me the story. He won't say that. He'll go, where did you hear it?
Where did you hear that story?
Where did you hear that story? You know what I mean?
I might say that after you tell the story, like, hold it. Where did you hear that story?
But this is a very important thing that goes on in our tradition, and that's how we keep the tradition strong. Otherwise, it's sort of like the electric current will be sort of dim, and right, you won't get that shock. We want to get that spiritual shock that's coming from Krishna, and we're not going to get it if we water down and just whitewash, embellish.
But honestly, I appreciate your embellishments, Raghu. They keep it entertaining.
Well, it's the embellishment. It goes. You got to go. The point if you embellish, and I'm not recommending to do it, but
like people that really know what they're doing.
The essential teaching of the story, and the essential teaching is these ladies had so much bhakti. And the husbands, even though they were considered very learned, they were aloof to Krishna and Balaram. They said you made that point. They didn't even answer. And, if you're complaining about something, hey, you shouldn't do this. Who do you think you are? How dare you do this? It's one thing if I say, yeah, shut up. It's another thing if you say, who are you? Just like you're like dismissive and you treat a person like they're irrelevant. They were treating Krishna and Balaram like they were irrelevant. So here they are in the name of religion.
Right.
And they can't even see God right in front of their face. That was this.
Well, to me, it's very popular, certainly in the United States right now.
What's popular?
For people to say, you know what, I'm not interested in religion. Spirituality, I'm interested in, right?
Right.
And I think most people don't. It's the whole thing's a little fuzzy in their head, right? They may not even be able to clearly define what the difference is. Right. But there's some intuition under there, and I think it has a lot to do with this. It's really what the Bhagavatam does is it kind of takes, if you go to the Vedas, that's in many ways it's like religion. It's too concerned with the externals, missing the internal point. Right? It can happen. One can get lost in the externals.
Sure.
And so what Bhagavatam does is it says, don't miss the point. Keep it on the spiritual point, right? Whatever you do externally, whether it be in terms of ritual or mantra chanting or some sort of exercise or some, whatever it is that the external, never forget where it ties in and the qualities that the true spiritualist thrives on, or lives through, humility, kindness, generosity. If you're losing touch with that, how can it truly be spiritual?
You missed the point. Yeah.
Yeah, lost the plot.
And the Bhagavatam, and we were mentioning this on Sweet Baby Krishna last night, that the Bhagavatam is so thorough and so broad and so deep, yet so detailed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just experimenting around with spiritual paths, which is very normal, you experiment, you show up and you find a Bhagavatam, you read that, and you read all the other books, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, whatever.
It's a classic.
Well, a classic. And you're just reading around. That you will find the Srimad Bhagavatam, these Vedic teachings, will be the sounding board for every other philosophy that you could come across. You'll be like, okay, that sounds interesting. The Bhagavatam says this about that. It covers everything. It's like the great reservoir. And when you study any other path, you'll find you'll bring it right back to the Bhagavatam and compare it with it. That happened for me for sure. But it's because of its vastness and its very wide-gated approach to spiritual paths and refined detail that it becomes the gold standard for or the metric to see, well, what is this? Who is that guru? And that's why it's also important when you hear something from a guru or a teacher, or I read what do you think of this guy? You don't just go to them, because these people who are doing the rituals, that it's said in the Bhagavatam, in the actual text, Kaustubha, they were doing rituals for attainment of higher planets, not even bhakti at all.
Right.
And it's quite confusing. If you were to go to India, it's quite confusing because they're wearing the same clothes. They've got the same beard or the same knotted hair. They have the same Brahmin thread. They're chanting Sanskrit. It appears like it's the same. It's not the same. It's a whole different path.
Right. There's a excerpt in The Journey Home by Raghunath Swami, where he describes, he's kind of new in India, right? He had hitchhiked, all the way through Europe, and
that itself is a book. I hitchhiked to India.
Yeah, and he has these near-death experiences left and right, and he finally arrives in India. He's kind of new there. He's this kid that just dropped in out of nowhere in the middle of India without any guide. And so he's just kind of, looking for spirituality, and he sees this family doing this puja, right? I forget if it was like a Ganesh puja or something like that, and I think it was Ganesh. And he's looking at the sincerity, the beauty in the ritual itself. The flowers are being offered, incense is being offered. You can see this, the piety in these people, and he's thinking, my goodness, this is so beautiful, And then when they were done, he kind of humbly approached and said, could you please explain this, what was happening? And then they explained what their motive behind the whole thing was, and it was entirely materialistic. It was like, well, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something like, well, we're starting a new business and we want to make more money, or it was something like that.
Yeah, right.
Which in itself, that's not necessarily like the worst thing in the world. It's not like horribly evil or something, but the point is, human life, we have the opportunity to go so much more deep. And
Kaustubha is condoning worship of the demigods. Take note. That's one of the takeaways today, Mara.
But what the Bhagavatam is saying is like, that was meant to be a first step. That was meant to be like just to come to a little bit of a level of appreciation that the things of this world didn't pop out of nowhere, that they're being shared with you, by someone. Appreciate that,
Yeah.
But our potential is so much more. And so the Bhagavatam is going to really highlight, don't miss out on your full spiritual potential. That kind of puja, people call it bhakti, right? Like they're practicing bhakti, like they're doing a puja. And what the great teachers of bhakti have really carefully pointed out, and what's pointed out by Vyasadeva in the Bhagavatam, is that externally that looks like bhakti, but it's not truly what bhakti is.
Looks like bhakti. It does, right? They got the flower, they got the incense,
Yeah.
They've got the deity. That's bhakti. It's Ganesh bhakti.
It's making an offering. It's worship. Yeah. You could say, that's worship, but it's not bhakti, because what bhakti means is that the motive, there's no selfish motivation. Bhakti means love, right? It means that the motive and the goal of it is love. And so, I always compare that to like someone proposing to someone, right?
Sure.
If there's a person that's proposing to another and they're speaking words of love, I love you, I want to make you happy, I want to share my life with you and give my life to you, but that underneath, that's love. If
They want
that's
your fortune.
they want your fortune. They
Yeah,
want
right.
something from you. Even once they get it, they'll leave you behind. And if you know that that's the motive, then externally those are words of love, but really they've come to you to get. It's not truly love. And so those external rituals, whether it be in a temple, in someone's home, it's externally it looks like an expression of love, but whether it is or not depends upon the motive. And that's why in bhakti, really the whole idea is we're trying to purify that motive. We set the goal that I'm not going to approach God for these material things, and then to fully get there, we're trying to root out all of the materialism within our mind or heart. And it's just a process of gradually purifying it more, purifying that spiritual intention more and more and more.
Now, Prabhu, somebody could argue, say, well, I'm not pure. I'm not worshiping Lord Vishnu with purity. I'm not worshiping. Actually, I do still have a lot of material motives. I want wealth, or I want popularity, or I want fame, or I want my business to succeed, and I'm worshiping Lord Vishnu. The difference is this. Lord Vishnu will accept that worship, but he'll actually give you bhakti. He might give you what you need. He might, but he also might purify you of those desires. Right. Sometimes Lord Vishnu will give you actually what you want, only so you realize you don't want it.
Right.
I'm sure we've all been in that place. You really want something and you get it and you're like, who cares about this? Right? What was I thinking? Or you worship so much. Please give me this. Please, I want to get this. The secret, the power of intention, and it finally manifested. And then all of a sudden you're like, and you don't get it. Because some people, you want something, you don't get it. But by worshiping Lord Vishnu for that object, you start to realize, why am I killing myself to get this thing, this stuff? So those are the two things that really happen it's the worship still there, but Lord Vishnu purifies you of that desire by either giving it or not giving it. But either way, the desire is plucked from the heart.
That reminds me, I saw this quote recently from Jim Carrey.
Wait a second.
You got that quote?
I did too. I gotta look at my phone right now.
Man, we are connecting.
We are so freaking connected. I just screenshotted it. Okay, you tell it, and I'm going to show you if I have it on my screenshot.
He said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so that they can see that it's not the answer. Is that what you were thinking?
No, it wasn't.
Well, I guess we're not thinking the same.
We weren't thinking. It was a really good.
We're not connected.
Oh, it was. Man, what did I do with it? Crud. Ah, come on, Jim Carrey. It was a great.
Was it? Well, give me the gist of what yours was.
The gist was. I can't remember now. I can't remember. It was really good.
All right.
He's very Krishna conscious.
I think this one's pretty good too. I'll read it again. He says,
Let's say a prayer. Let's say a prayer that we can meet Jim Carrey, because I kind of feel him to be a great devotee.
He seems like a good guy. So he said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that it's not the answer. And so, as you're saying, if you approach God with that, with your desires, rather than block him out of your life, you might learn something through it and get a deeper realization, right? A deeper realization that, okay, now I get it. That's why we hear. That's why we take in Bhagavatam every day, so that actually, when that moment comes, when we realize that what we wanted wasn't what truly satisfies, that rather than just jumping to the next thing, you reflect.
Yeah.
Right? You reflect on that knowledge that you've heard, and then there's some growth there, right? And that's what we call maturing knowledge into wisdom, right? Like the jnana, which means knowledge, to vijnana, which means deeper realized knowledge. This so much of our process is really about that reflection as we go through these challenges in life and maturing what we've heard from Bhagavatam, from Bhagavad Gita, into realized knowledge so that we see the world in an entirely different way.
Realized knowledge, yes.
Yeah.
All right, here's my Jim Carrey quote. Ready?
Yeah.
The funny thing is Jim Carrey, uvāca. The funny thing is that when you start feeling happy alone, that's when everyone decides to be with you.
Oh.
Ah,
So in
he's
other
so
words,
wise.
So I'm
He's
trying
so
to understand
wise.
that. So he's saying like we might try and go out and make lots of friends or have deep loving relationships, but if we first kind of get our own spiritual realization,
You're
is that-
looking for someone to fill your God hole.
right,
And so we're going out. Will you be my friend? Will you be my friend?
and it's actually
when we-
repulsive.
Yeah.
Like that's repulsive to others.
Sometimes it's repulsive. Sometimes it's okay, but they're not going to be your God. But what the thing is, when you're actually connected, when you're spiritually connected, you're happy with just being with yourself. And that's the most attractive thing. That attracts people. And you actually have something to contribute to someone else's life.
Right.
That's my commentary. That's my purport for Jim Carrey. I'm working on my Jim Carrey purports right now.
All right.
I take all his quotes and I write commentaries on them. We're combining this to make it a new Bhagavad Gita.
All right.
All right.
Should we continue then?
Yes.
Text 14.
Let me offer my obeisances to the supreme transcendence, who is eternally distinguished by his internal potency. His indistinguishable impersonal feature is realized by intelligence for self-realization. I offer my obeisances to him by him who by his pastimes enjoys the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. He enjoys it.
Okay.
He enjoys the dissolution. Come on.
He sees it for what it is.
Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious limitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes his transcendental names, even unconsciously, at the time he quits this life, is certainly washed immediately of sins of many, many births and attains him without fail. That seems unfair, right? Even unconsciously? Oh.
I don't
Go
buy
on.
into your attitude. Why unfair? Like, why not say, wow,
Yeah, it seems
it's really great, you know?
yeah,
Like,
it is. It seems like it's
if
all
you're in
right,
jail and someone
it's like
said, I'm just going to pick someone to let loose you, would you say, no, this is unfair? No, you just say, wow. Like,
well, it is unfair for those who didn't chant it.
No,
because
it's not.
that wasn't even
It's
chanting
not
it.
unfair.
No, it's like a double coupon day. You know what I mean? It's like it's extra special. Yeah, I
It's
guess
called
it's
mercy.
yeah, it's okay. All righty. Text 16. Your lordship is the prime root of the tree of the planetary systems. This tree has grown by first penetrating the material nature in 3 trunks, as me, Shiva, and you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we have grown with many branches. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you, the tree of the cosmic manifestation.
Yeah, he's that very root of that tree of the cosmic manifestation. Right. This is I mean, it almost feels like it's directly alluding to Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, you know, where the Ashvata tree is described. Shall
The
we read it?
Ashvata tree. You
Shall
want
we
to talk a
read it
little
now?
about chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita? That's a great chapter.
Well, it starts with this, you know, this analogy is like a game changer, right? In other words, we just have to get the basic idea of what is this world and what are we doing here? So this is how the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita starts. Krishna says, it is said that there's an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. And so what it's saying is, where do we see a tree that's roots are going up, branches are going down.
In a creek, in a river, in a pond.
They grow in the pond.
Well, the reflection. You see the reflection of the tree in the pond.
Okay, yeah. So it's speaking of reflection, right? That in one sense, this world, it's a metaphor describing the material world, and it's saying that this world is like a reflection. You know, there's a lot of talk in Eastern circles about how the world is illusory. And so this is trying to help us understand that it's illusory in the sense that it's not entirely unreal. It exists.
It's not nothing.
Yeah, there's something there for sure. But it's but it's like a reflection is an illusion. You know, a mirror exists. The reflection exists. But if we think that the reflection is reality, then we're an illusion. We're confused. Text 3 and 4 continue with this metaphor. It says the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. In other words, when you have a reflection, there's something that's real that's being reflected. Right? You understand? There's no reflection without the substance that's being reflected.
Right.
The subject, right? So here it says the real form, the subject that's being reflected, cannot be perceived in this world. So we're living in a world that's a reflection, and we can't see what's being reflected. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is, right? We don't know. Scientists cannot figure out the end of the universe, you know, where it came from, you know, what it's based on. But then it says this, but with determination, this is speaking about yoga, but with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree. With what? With the weapon of detachment, right? We need to free ourselves. The idea of this banyan tree is like entangling. You get lost in one, right? They're so huge, and they got all, you can't tell where it started, where it ended, because it just expands.
Yeah.
Right? But the way that we get out, we have to detach ourselves from it. We have to see it for what it is, and all those desires. Because when it was talking about earlier, when it said that the leaves of the Vedic hymns, that means like the Vedic hymns teach how to find material enjoyment in life. And so we're going around that tree and we're lost in it and we're caught up in it. We need to become detached. And so he says, therefore, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. And there surrender to that adipurusha. I think the word here is adipurusha, that original. Let me make sure. To the Purusham prapadyate, surrender unto that person. It says adayam Purusham prapadyante, surrender to that original person from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So the Bhagavad Gita here is also recognizing that everything comes from a person, right? There's personality behind everything. There's personality behind this universe. There's personality behind the rain. There's personality behind the sun. And there's a personality from whom the entire thing is stemming. Detach yourself from the material things of this world. Analyze them. Realize how ultimately they don't satisfy. Reflect on that. Deepen one's detachment from it. And then recognize the person that's behind it, from which it all stems, and connect. Right? Connect with that person. That's the formula here.
Take that steel chainsaw and cut down that banyan tree.
Take the chainsaw of supercharged attachment. But
Supercharged, yeah.
You know, some things are interesting about reflections. Like, to me, this is a real key verse because it helps us understand the nature of this world. And rather than just telling us the world's an illusion, it takes us further. Because what does that illusion mean? It doesn't exist? It's not real. I don't understand.
It's something. It's just not what it appears to be. That's the beauty of this, of the Gita.
Right. And the thing about reflections, if we think about reflections, is that they appear identical to the source, but they're exact opposite. So
I like that. I like
so
that. It appears identical, but it's the exact opposite. Kaustubha does.
Well, because, you know, if we were to look at this world and say, this world causes pain, I get that, I want to become detached, if this world is full of relationships and full of form and full of personality, then what I'm looking for is the opposite. It must be no form, no personality. No, it's the opposite in a different way, right? Like the opposite of an image in a mirror isn't like no image. It looks exactly like it, but it's backwards. And so that means in the spiritual realm, in truth, in reality, there is form, there is individuality, there is personality, there is relationship. But it's just that our relationships are backwards here. They're upside down.
Bhagavatam is that gold standard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that sounding board for all other philosophies. It makes sense now.
The Bhagavatam's going to take this verse and just completely fluff it out and show us what it looks like in the whole 10th chapter after chapter, that there is such a thing as relationship without selfishness. There is such a thing as like existence without everybody working for their own happiness separately. There is such a thing as finding happiness through service. So that's the upside down. That's how everything's backwards, you know. And so if we can look at the world and see it that way, it's the key. It changes everything. It means we step out of the illusion and into the reality, out of the reflection and into the true substance.
That's beautiful.
All right. Well, maybe
Mara, what are your takeaways today? You got some takeaways today?
Yes, I do.
Takeaways, if you're unfamiliar with takeaways, are little nuggets you can put in your pocket, carry it with you, wear around your neck, tattoo it, something to help us bolster us up during the course of this.
Share it with a friend.
Share it with a friend. Write it on your phone. Tag us.
Share it with Jim Carrey someday.
Yeah, Jim Carrey does it all the time.
Don't miss out on your full spiritual potential.
I missed that. See? Tag me on that one.
Recognize the person behind it and connect.
I missed that one too.
That was just a second ago, Rag. Where were you?
Yeah, you weren't listening to anything Kaustubha said.
Yeah.
Purify the motive.
Purify the motive.
And good association is keystone of bhakti.
All right.
I missed that. I would have remembered keystone because I like that word.
No, that came out early. That was from Dr. Grant.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, there's Bhakti. Oh, yeah. Okay, Bhakti Grant. How about Krishna's mercy is like double coupon day?
Also a good one.
There you go.
That's going to be a tattoo.
Tattoo a coupon. I want to thank Bhakti Grant for being so vulnerable and sharing that beautiful story. I tell you, beautiful stories. People have incredible stories, the backstories. Thanks, Grant, for joining us. Appreciate you.
There's a BRG meeting today, recovery group meeting today.
Bhakti Recovery Group meeting today for all the Patreon members. And thanks to everybody who joined us yesterday.
1 p.m.
1 p.m.
1
Okay,
p.m.
great. This Saturday,
And there's also an asana class with Trevor Vaughn today at 8 o'clock, 8 a.m.
Trevor.
for Patreon members. Yeah. Sorry, Raghu.
Sure.
You're teaching too, Raghu, before that?
Yeah, I'm teaching at 7 a.m. for those who want to jump on the Raghu train. Got to go to supersoulyoga.com. Sign up for that one. Hey, I'm in New York on Saturday, and I hope. Let me know if you put it on the board right now if you're going. But if you're not going, come, because I want to meet you and hear your backstory. That's at the Bhakti Center at 25 First Avenue in New York City. Go to bhakticenter.org to find more information about that. But it's all day with Raghunath and lunch. If you can tolerate it. Mayor's like all day with Raghunath.
By lunchtime, nobody's around anymore.
Where'd everybody go?
I'm just there. It's you and me, Raghu.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of people. A bunch of guys were. Oh, Jeff Eisenberg is going to be there. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Hands in the air. It's time to move.